We are back with the second half of Live from the Heartland. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for joining us, whether that's on the radio or online. We appreciate your participation and your feedback. For our second guest today, we have the longtime director, only forever director of Interfaith Workers Justice, Ms. Kim Bobo, who is a neighbor and friend and great ally. Welcome.
Thanks, Katie.
Welcome back.
And choir director.
And choir director.
That's right. I, of course,
Good News
left
Community
that out.
Church. Come on down Sunday morning.
Good News, yes. Good News Community Church on Paulina.
That's right, 7649.
And you've been doing, how do you do this? You're a choir director.
Well, it is such a blessing. Right?
Yeah,
I
know.
It's just one of the joys in life. Is
Closer to the mic.
It's a joy in life to be a choir director.
Yeah, one of my fondest wishes is to start a Rogers Park chorus.
Ooh.
Really. I mean,
Okay.
that would, not so much, church related, but that could sing anything. That would, because I know it's such a joy.
It
Hallelujah.
is such a joy.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
I don't think Michael was ever in a choir.
Oh, yes, I was.
Oh, really?
I was in a lot of choirs. What are you kidding? You think my voice is, you were making a...
No, I was,
Okay.
no, not at all. I just didn't think you made time for that in your, very full
besides
life.
football, I was in choirs. Kim Bobo, you are, for a long time, your name comes up with an organization that you founded, Interfaith Workers Justice. How about telling us about your organization and what it does? Because I'm going to ask you more questions about it, but I'm always impressed about how people try to pull together religious communities and labor movements and work for the better cause of everything. And your group is one of those.
Yeah, well, the history on it is that I have always engaged the faith community on a variety of poor people's issues, right? I worked for Bread for the World for 10 years. I was with the Midwest Academy. And part of the time with the Academy, I started doing work with labor unions and realized that they didn't view the religious community as a strong ally. And I thought, well, that's odd. Why not, right? So I started getting involved here, first in Chicago, and I put together a group, an interfaith committee, which eventually became Arise Chicago, that supports labor issues in Chicago. And then it honestly seemed like one of the most important things I was doing, and it seemed like there was this real gap in terms of what the religious community was doing on labor issues. And so in '96, I started Interfaith Worker Justice with the mission of engaging the faith community on labor issues. And honestly, my main vision was that we would work primarily with labor unions, right, to get good contracts, to organize, and that we would be sort of a faith community support for labor unions. And honestly, we've done that, and we've continued to do that. But the mission has really expanded, in part because labor unions don't exist in lots of parts of the country.
That's right.
Unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
And so we've started building these worker centers, and we now have 28 worker centers around the country that are really for workers who don't have access to unions. And out of that worker center work has come the issue of wage theft, right? The issue where workers aren't getting paid for all their work. And so, in fact, one of the main things we're known for nationally right now is our work on wage theft.
Yeah. Well, you wrote the book.
I did.
called Wage Theft.
Moving into this week's events, I remember your early work with workers in the South on chicken factories.
Yeah.
And here you are going up McDonald's this week. You had thousands of people showing up in Oak Brook. How did this
Talk about closing the circle.
Yeah,
just follow the food chain here, and it's a pretty amazing...
So much for chicken McNuggets.
That's right. There you go. Well, what's happening right now is that increasingly jobs are becoming low-wage jobs and part-time jobs.
Right.
And unless we figure out how to stop that and change what's going on in the nation, we're going to have a nation of a handful of rich people and a large number of very poor people. And so we have two companies that are kind of the quintessential low-road employers. One is Walmart, which is the largest employer in the U.S., and the second largest private sector employer in the country is McDonald's. And so this week we saw McDonald's workers across the country walk out of their jobs and come to Chicago for the protest at the McDonald's shareholders meeting. So there were several thousand folks, mostly workers, but lots of allies and lots of religious allies. Arise Chicago really organized 24 clergy here in Chicago to take arrests, along with more than 100 workers. And I had the opportunity, as the director of Interfaith Workers Justice, to join the workers and take part in the arrests out in Oak Brook.
So you got arrested again.
I did get arrested
What were the
again.
charges this time? Disorderly, resisting, aggravated battery, mob action. What did they get you for?
Yeah.
Well, we were trespassing on the
Corporate
the
headquarters.
corporate headquarters. You know, it was such a contrast that they have this sort of campus. The
It's an
McDonald's
incredible campus.
Campus, and honestly, I'd never been out there, and it's gorgeous. It's like a park. It's manicured. It's these fancy grounds, these nice bridges, these gorgeous little waterways.
Hordes of geese.
You know, but it's built on the backs of low-wage workers.
Amen.
So I'm sitting, you know, we kind of marched in, and then we sat down where we weren't supposed to, and actually it took them a long time to get rid of us. I was just like, we were like, come on, time to arrest us now. Okay, ready, time to go home. But anyway, so we sat on the ground praying
Time
and
to arrest
singing
us.
and whatever.
It's a small police department, right?
Yeah. And they were clearly in Oak Brook not used to large crowds. They could learn a little from Chicago on how to process this stuff faster.
Yeah, like
Please.
outnumbering us.
But you know, I spent my whole time out there just talking to workers and asking them about, like, why were they there? So right next to me, sitting on the ground, was Alexia, a young woman from Houston, Texas. She's got one child she's trying to raise. She earns $7.25 an hour. And I said, well, why are you here? And she said, I want to feed my family, right? I mean, worker after
Something other than
worker.
chicken McNuggets.
Exactly right. You know, across the board, all the workers I talked to who were from states where the minimum wage is $7.25, they were all paid $7.25. Folks from here in Chicago, most were paid $8.25, our Illinois minimum wage. I did talk to one worker who was paid $9 an hour. She had worked for McDonald's for 14 years. $9 an hour.
My student interns earn more than that after they've been with us a year.
I mean, it's outrageous, outrageous. You know, the CEO, Don Thompson, this last year, he was paid $9.3 million.
Gee, I hope that's enough for him.
Yeah, but of
many
course
kids
it was
does
a
this guy
cut
have?
from for 2012. He made $13.8 million. So he took a cut last year.
Wow.
Poor
I
guy's
hope he got
really
by.
suffering. But you know, when he was asked, because of all these protests, he was asked about the wage payment stuff. What he said was, we pay fair, competitive wages, and we provide job opportunities and training for those entering the workforce. We're trying to be a really great employer. Really? You know, it's so interesting to me that these employers, they just make it up as they go along. I mean, what does it mean to be a really great employer when the vast majority of your workers are earning minimum wage or just a tiny bit above? And on top of that, McDonald's is stealing wages. There are 3 large class action lawsuits that have been filed alleging, and honestly, my experience on these things is that when they're alleged, they're actually true, alleging that the managers are not paying workers for all their wages. And The company has sent out this little app to all the managers around that tells them how they need to make sure they don't have too many workers inside the store at any given time. So if your numbers inside the store go down, then you should reduce your workforce inside. And so what managers have done is they send people out to the parking lot to sit in their cars while the numbers are low in the store, and then when it goes up, they tell them to come back in. Well, clearly that's
They're off the clock during
They're
that time.
off the clock. That's right. Blatantly illegal, happening across the country at a bunch of the McDonald's. So again, this is a company that says it cares for its workers, but clearly it doesn't. It has a workforce of about 440,000 workers in the U.S. Every year, it hires 1 million workers. What does that say? It's got this incredible turnover.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some costs there. They, as a company, they could do better. They are making billions of dollars. They could do better. And frankly, all of us should care about this for several reasons. One reason is 1 out of 8 workers in the country has worked for McDonald's at one time or another, right? So at some point, all of us are going to have family members who've worked for McDonald's, and they're going to be making low wages. But secondly, it's estimated that McDonald's workers use $1.2 billion in public subsidies. So basically, it's welfare to McDonald's that you and I are paying. If we are paying taxes, we are subsidizing McDonald's to the tune of $1.2 billion a year because they don't pay people enough, and so they end up on Medicaid and food stamps. And in fact, McDonald's tells them to do this.
Yeah.
They tell them
just
to
like
go
Walmart.
to the... Yes, exactly. It's outrageous.
It is outrageous.
Let me ask
I just wanted to say how stunning it is that these low-wage workers are taking the time to be the heroes that they are in the raise the minimum wage fight.
Katie, you are so right.
I'm blown away by their courage.
And it's courage both because of the money that they're losing, right? But imagine what happens when they go back to the stores, right? They get harassed, they get their hours cut. It does take enormous courage.
Well, that was my question. I mean, I think McDonald's they're franchises, so there are individuals who own each franchise, and I'm just wondering if
there are some that are franchised, and there are some that are owned directly.
All right, so I'm wondering if all of the franchise owners are all evil capitalist, nasty bosses, or if there's any room for working with them, or they just have no control over things.
Well, yes, absolutely. Local franchise owners have some control, and they could choose to do things differently. But again, this is a national company with national standards, right? They have national standards
only go so far.
On how hamburgers are done, on how the place is decorated. They could also have national standards on how workers are paid and treated. So again, yes, franchisees could do better, but again, we also need leadership at the top level.
Kim Bobo, broaden this discussion out to the move for fair wages around the country. We know that in Seattle they just passed a $15 minimum wage in the local area. There's a lot of discussion about it. There's moves going on nationally. For the president has called for at least $10.10. We see resistance from even a Rauner running for the governor in this state. What's the take on what's going on nationally in this movement?
Well, there is a fight, and it's a fight at the federal level to raise the minimum wage, and it's a fight at the private sector level to push some of the big employers to pay independently even higher than the minimum wage, to pay
a living wage.
More of a living wage, that's right. And I think both of these movements actually support and encourage one another in
Sure.
ways that are really helpful. Actually, what you hear a lot is folks saying, well, I'm not sure about that $15 an hour that those McDonald's workers want, but maybe 10-10, right? I mean, it's creating the context that actually might help us win on the minimum wage.
Right.
I think what we're going to see on the minimum wage, Congress, as you know, is completely dysfunctional on most everything right now. And yet, as more and more states pass a minimum wage, it will put enormous pressure on the feds to pass a minimum wage. So I think we will probably see an increase, but we've got to win a lot of these state fights. And honestly, it's quite outrageous that here in Illinois, where we have a Democratic governor and Democratic state and Senate, House and Senate, that we can't pass a minimum wage increase, and that they want to put on the ballot a sort of recommendation on raising them. Really? That's the best we can do in
Really?
Illinois? I mean, we ought to have passed a minimum wage increase in Illinois. They've passed it in a number of the other states. We ought to be able
Further
to do
proof
it
that in Illinois and in Chicago, our Dems are Republicans.
It's really completely nuts to me. But I think what we are going to see, especially in the states that have real ballot initiatives, right, binding ballot initiatives, we're going to win the minimum wage increase in South Dakota, in Arkansas, in Alaska, maybe Michigan, depending on what happens. They're trying to undermine it completely there. So every place it will be on the ballot for a real ballot initiative, we will win it because the polls are off the charts on this stuff.
90%.
And of course, that's part of Madigan's ploy, is to try to churn up turnout to help Governor Quinn. And unfortunately, it's sort of a fake referendum because it has no teeth to it.
That's right. I mean, we should just pass this,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I understand that some want to use this issue as an election issue, but people's lives are at stake,
Yeah.
right? Feeding their families are at stake. And,
Right.
and when we got 825 and we could have 1010 in Illinois, that's outrageous.
I find another intriguing thing with this story, particularly the way the McDonald's demonstration came down this week. You're getting an incredible amount of positive media coverage. Unlike our previous guests where Honduras can't even get on the map,
Yes.
Whether it's wage theft or trying to raise the minimum wage, this thing has some gravitas in terms of the way the media is doing. I read a story this morning where Pioneer Local, same kind of experience you had, really talking with local workers and workers that came from out of town about their particular situation. This is the local, the former weekly newspaper out in Oak Brook. Long story, but it was also covered by USA Today, Bloomberg News,
Well, it's
National
their-
News. It
it's-
was a huge story.
They're covering their own.
Well,
is that
I
it?
think all
maybe.
of us, maybe in some other era, sort of, you could separate yourself from low-wage workers. Increasingly, you can't.
That's right.
Everybody has kids or brothers or sisters or somebody who's earning a low-wage job and can't make ends meet. And we know that, as a society, we have got to change something. And when you've got companies like McDonald's and Walmart making just astronomical profits, it's not like they can't do better,
Right.
They can do better. They could afford it, and it is a false choice every time they say, well, if we raise wages, then we'll lose
So
jobs.
false.
That is so not true. They have several lies that they put out there on a regular basis. I'm from the faith community. We like to call things as they are. This is a lie, right? To suggest that if McDonald's or Walmart raises wages that they're going to lose jobs, that is flat out a lie. And they have this lie that they want to perpetrate that suggests that these are opportunity jobs, right? Walmart has this line where I went to the shareholders meeting at Walmart last year, and they had this line that they kept
Did you get
saying
arrested?
over and no, I
Not that time.
didn't,
Okay.
but it was quite a scene. But they kept saying, if you have talent and work hard, we provide opportunity. Now let's look at that. That's suggesting that if you don't move up in the ranks right away, that you either aren't working hard or have no talent.
Right.
This whole opportunity line is one that clearly they've pulled on, right? Because you hear it from the National Restaurant Association, from McDonald's, from Walmart. It's saying that well, we might not pay the greatest wages, but we provide opportunity. Well, the fact that a few people end up doing well, a very few people become managers, a very few people slip through and do well, doesn't mean you shouldn't have to figure out how you pay the vast majority of your workers fairly.
And the built-in turnover.
Oh, it's.
I mean, those figures that you just gave are horrible, that they plan that people will not stay long.
That's right.
In other words, if someone actually shows talent and initiative, they're not going to last long.
That's right.
Because there's only so high you can go.
Well, and it also implies that somehow these jobs are easy jobs. Anybody who's worked at McDonald's, those are not all that easy jobs, right? It's constant pressure and flipping and handling customers. And I mean, those are not all that easy jobs.
Yeah. Before we're running out of time, so I want to make sure you tell us about the Chicago Wage Theft Clinic.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much.
Because we only have a few minutes.
So what we're finding is that the same companies that pay low wages, in addition to that, often cheat people of their wages by not paying minimum wage, by not paying overtime, by cheating people on tips, by when you get fired or laid off, you don't get your last paycheck. And so Interfaith Worker Justice here in Chicago has started a free, let me say that again, free legal wage theft clinic. So if you haven't gotten paid all your wages, you can show up at our clinic on Monday nights. Now, not this coming Monday night because it's Memorial Day and it's closed, but it's at 19 West Jackson Boulevard at John Marshall Law School, 19 West Jackson on the ground floor from 5 to 6:30 p.m. You show up and sign in, and you will have some lawyers who can help you recover your unpaid wages. In Illinois, if you haven't been paid minimum wage or overtime, you can file complaints anonymously. But, you know, if you've left your job within the last couple years and you know you were cheated of wages, you worked off the clock, you worked through your lunch hour and weren't paid for it, you worked overtime, weren't paid the overtime premium, come to this free legal wage theft clinic. Again, it's Monday night, sign in from 5 to 6:30 p.m., 19 West Jackson.
Thank you so much.
Kim, real briefly, you know, wage theft is an ongoing issue not only in this country but around the world.
Absolutely.
And I just wonder what are the implications for this movement that we're talking about here about increasing wages around the country, around the world. I know the Interfaith Worker Justice, when I first learned of you, we were involved in things going on in Guatemala. What's happening on these things around the world?
Well, clearly companies like Walmart and McDonald's, these are global companies. And so they set wages and standards not only for workers here, but workers around the globe and through their supply chain. And that's, I think, the place where there's the most action around the country is that supply chain, right? That if you're providing products for McDonald's, products for Walmart, you can determine, you can set how workers will be paid in those supply chains. And again, McDonald's, Walmart, they've not been good global citizens either.
No. Kim Bobo, thank you so much for all that you do and for coming on today.
It was worth the wait to have you on this show. This was really nice, and I learned a lot.
Thanks so much, guys.
You keep on keeping on, and you're going to leave some of those flyers at the free legal
Absolutely.
free
I'll leave
flyer
them up
place.
front. That's why I brought them.
Excellent. So we want to thank everybody who makes this show possible.
We do.
We want to thank our guests. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Vicky Cervantes. We want to thank the on-site and online and radio audiences, all of them. And we'd like to invite you to like the Live from the Heartland Facebook page. We thank the Heartland Cafe for continuing to host this craziness every Saturday morning. We love being here. We want to thank Grant Steskel, Nolan Chin, Paul and Mary Wozniak, Hal James, and our wonderful co-host, Tom Clark.
Thank you, Katie and Michael.
And I want to put out a call for people to come forward and help out a little bit. We always can use people interested in videography. We could use more engineering. We could use producers. We could use people who know internet stuff. So it's Michael at heartlandcafe.com or Katie that's Katy at heartlandcafe.com. And I want to encourage you all to continue to do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do. All power to the people. And flavor your heart and your soul. That song will take us out. Stay tuned for the next show on WLUW 88.7.
Thank you.